Welcome to the first live Thinking Spot PonderPod podcast. And today we are streaming for Mind. I'm hoping to raise £400 for Mind, a mental health charity here in the UK. And the reason why I'm choosing £400 is because 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health problem each year. And I'm hoping that over a period of time, I am going to be streaming 4 hours of live content with some really interesting people who I have met along the way, who are also as passionate as me with mental health, well-being, trauma and stress. And today I have the wonderful Lucy Green, who is the founder of WoolWellness UK. And it's such a pleasure to have you here today, Lucy. So I just want to say welcome. And why do you do what you do? What is WoolWellness UK?
Thank you, Krissi. Hi. Well, WoolWellness UK, it's basically is what it says on the tin. So using wool crafts for therapeutic benefit to support mental health and well-being. Stemmed from many, many years ago, so 2015, where after nearly 20 years in schools, I suffered a nervous breakdown with 3 children, full-time job, and that was that complete burnout gone, and that was a very difficult period, and I used not only yoga and meditation to support myself and heal and get better and to lower my stress levels, but I also used woolcraft. And being a science teacher, I always wanted to know, why is this working? What is it about knitting in particular that helped me? And the more I looked into it, the more I realized there's so much research done about the therapeutic benefits of woolcraft. We kind of have to shift our perspective of it being an old granny sitting knitting on the couch, which is fine and wonderful, but actually see what that does. And the research shows that knitting lowers your blood pressure and your heart rate. It releases serotonin. It's a bilateral psychosomatic rhythmic movement, and the pioneer Betsan Corkill in 2005, who started the research in the UK, she has undertaken lots of different evidence-based studies with different universities, and works across Europe as supporting the therapeutic benefits of knitting and building on the evidence. And it affects your brain, just as we, one of the things that we can perhaps discuss easier is how to support our physical health. And when you're feeling physically unwell, you're able to exercise or eat healthy or change your diet. But when you're feeling mentally unwell, what do you do? And there's lots of different ways in which we can support our mental health, and one of the biggest things is coming into the present moment and grounding ourselves and trying to lower the stress levels, and that's easier said than done when you're in an anxious state. So knitting, the portability of knitting is amazing because we can take it anywhere. Which teaches perseverance and patience. So you sort of reforming these skills that you may have lost, which perhaps led to suffering from poor mental health. So WoolWellness came from that, and I thought, well, after all this study and reading around and thinking, okay, so this makes sense to me, because knitting stimulates all of the parts of your brain, both the top, the bottom, the left and right, releases the endorphins, releases serotonin. It focuses on your occipital lobe, the front with vision, your frontal lobe, so memory and movement, the reading, the amygdala, so their emotional regulation, and you're hitting all of the different parts of your brain. And it's a bit of a brain workout, really.
It is.
It's like a cross trainer for your brain when you're working both your arms and your legs at the same time. But imagine that kind of happening in your head. You're building connections with all those different parts of the brain that all really need to work together.
But you
So
do that in such a lovely, calming way. So even though your brain's having this mega workout inside, you see the children or the young people or adults who are knitting or working with wool, and actually they are so calm when they're doing it. And, all of those things that you're talking about, being in the present moment, grounding yourself. And, thank you for sharing, your journey with, mental health and burnout and stress, very similar to my story as well. Major stress, ended up with complex PTSD. And actually, all of those things that you talked about are things that we need to do to be able to regulate ourselves again. And
yes.
it grounds us in that present moment. It makes us feel safe. It helps us to anchor. Some people use that word instead. And absolutely, you just need that calming presence. And I'm thinking of the children who you've worked with, Lucy. And a bit of a disclaimer here, we were both teachers and we both worked at the same school. That is how I know Lucy. And you just have this really calming presence. And I can just imagine that when you're working with wool with young people as well, even the most challenging of young people are going to be calm. And it's definitely not a granny's thing anymore. It is far more cool, isn't it? So what types of young people have you worked with who people may not expect to enjoy wool work?
So, well, the most one that stands out is 15-year-old boys with serious emotional behavioural difficulties, ones that have been removed from exclusion schools even. So they're on their last stage. And I worked with a group of teenage boys, and I wanted to share what worked for me. I thought these skills are transferable, because if it's a brain workout for me in a calming manner, because that serotonin's released, then let's have a go. I had nothing to lose. And to see 15-year-old boys sitting with a pair of knitting needles and knitting away, it's like, it has the desired effect. It calms and it puts the brain into that alpha wave state,
Yes.
which is what young people need. I mean, we're looking at, it was in the media that even this morning, the referrals to emergency mental health services is up by 53%, and that's just in England alone.
Yeah.
So as an educator, I wanted to look at how can I use these skills that we've known for centuries, that if you spoke to anybody who's ever worked in woolcraft or does it for a hobby, and there's so many people now sharing more stories of how the knitting and crochet supported them through the pandemic, new skills to learn. And it was how I can take that and turn that and bring that into the classroom. And for a young person, it not only puts them in their calm state, but they're learning something new and they're socially included. It's creative as well as meditative. It regulates those emotions, because you cannot bring in negative thoughts cannot come in when you are concentrating so hard. But because of that serotonin release, it's calming as well. And it's been stated that it has the power to transform lives. And I really believe that it does, because we have got to the point now where we're at a mental health crisis. I mean, we're doing this for Mind, and not just for young people, but Mind is a big charity that covers children, adults, and from all walks of life. And I think we, as educators, certainly, we've got to try and look further afield and look outside the box for what we usually do and think, how can things like woolcraft come into their classroom? So I've worked in schools where we've just had the carders and sitting, calming and stroking, well, as if you'd have got a therapy dog or cat in. And that's
I can
really,
imagine.
so
Yeah.
sensory. And knitting is really difficult to start with. So you'd start with building fine motor skills, so winding wool or weaving, because that has the same effect in terms of a bilateral movement and built, like I say, building those fine motor skills. And at 12 to 25 in adolescence, that's a really important, as well as 0 to 5, that's another important time in a young person's life where they are developing their brain.
Yes.
And if we can ensure that these connections are made, that brain bridging happens, that we've got the different parts working together, we're strengthening the brain in that manner, but in such a nice environment, in such a safe space. You can choose to talk, you can choose to sit and do it individually. It's one of those things, you can either knit and chat, or you can just knit and concentrate. I don't know if you've ever been to a woolcraft group or anything like that, and the atmosphere is wonderful, and I want to recreate that in schools to be a safe space for children to create, work together, to talk if they wish, and to be included, to help regulate their emotions. Children, I found children with trauma especially like the sensory aspect, because it's comforting.
It is.
And the colours as well. Colours can affect mood, and working with colours, and they can show their mood with the colours in what they create too.
It's so expressive. It is an art form, isn't it? And just when you were talking there, the two words that kept on coming up in my mind were connection and belonging. Two things that I think in so many places, not just in schools or just in society in general at the moment, we're so busy in our lives. We're so wrapped up in what we're doing that we don't always have that belonging and that connection anymore. And when we talk about trauma, we always think about the things that happen to us, but actually it's about the things that don't happen to us as well. So for example, when we're babies, if we cry and nobody comes to soothe us, for example, we don't get that sense of connection that we need as human beings. Whereas with what you're doing with wool, everybody sort of knitting in a group or working with wool in a group, you're getting that sense of belonging, you're getting that sense of connection. And I guess that you will also gain that sense of confidence as well when other people look at your work and compliment it, or, just those social skills and how to accept some positive criticism, although it might not sound like criticism, oh, why don't you try this because it would look even better. Oh yeah, I like that idea. That's great. So there's just so much that can happen with knitting, which may seem like a really old-fashioned thing, but actually maybe we need to go back to things like that to gain that sense of belonging and connection and creativity and grounding and mindfulness that 21st century life has just made us completely forget, because it's about now. I want this right now. I want to go on this online website and order something, and by tomorrow I'm going to get it. In fact, tomorrow's too late. I want it today. It's like, oh my goodness, what are we doing to ourselves? Our brains have just not evolved quick enough to be able to meet with that high level demand constantly. And it's quite scary, really, when you speak to professionals, not just, in one industry, but across all different industries, about how hard they are working. And it's just not sustainable. But they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear, actually, you need to slow down and give your brain a bit of a rest, a bit of a break, because they want that magic pill or that magic exercise that's going to make them go, because they want to be resilient. And being resilient doesn't mean you're like the Energizer Bunny, you put in the battery and off you go bouncing up and down, because even the Energizer Bunny is going to run out of battery power at some point and is going to need new batteries in it. But we seem to have forgotten that.
We have. I mean, it's interesting. The word knit itself means unite, unity. very yogic, you know, it's like yoga means
Yes.
unity. And I think for me, that's why it has, it's much more of a spiritual activity. I like to meditate on each stitch, and take my time to lower my breathing rate if need to. I mean, I can knit away and I can knit not looking now.
Yeah.
One thing that but if you watch a child or a young person or even an adult, when they are focusing and concentrating, they've relaxed their muscles, and it's using knitting and woolcraft in a therapeutic way to make sure you're sitting properly and you're relaxed. And when you see them concentrating and the time spent, they slow down. You have to slow down.
Yes.
You have to physically slow down. And the perseverance that it can teach is wonderful, because you're right, it is such a slow process, from start to finish. If you imagine, let's make a jumper, that will take hours of time. It's not, I've just bought it. And it's a lot of love and care and your own feelings that go into it, because when you are working with wool in whatever aspect, you're putting part of your energy into that, and
Yeah.
your thoughts. I was working with a young boy last week. He's 9 years old, from Ukraine, and has undergone a lot of trauma and stress over the last year or so. And he was getting upset and frustrated, because it is. And he just said, "This is impossible." He just said, "This is impossible." And so I said, let's make the impossible possible. And he just mimicked me and copied the routine, have a little story, a little rhythm that goes with it, because it's a complex process, because you're making knots continually. And he did it. And the pride on his face after doing 2 rows of knitting was unbelievable.
Oh.
So he got a big perseverance award from his head teacher the next day, because he had really overcome something in himself then at that moment. He really had. The frustration with it wasn't necessarily about the knitting, it was just bringing up a lot of emotions for him. But he pushed through it, and it was wonderful to see. The group that I'm currently teaching, the mother said to me, "What is it you're doing with them?" Because she comes out so happy.
Oh, amazing.
The release of serotonin after a really busy day at school, and it's a nice wind down to help, to get on with the rest of the day and to release those emotions. So it's suitable for all ages.
So how do you encourage, say, 15-year-old boys, like you mentioned before? How do you actually convince them, Lucy, that this is a great thing to do? I'm going to sit you down and we're going to do some knitting, which is probably what your gran's done or your great nan's done. How do you convince them that this is a great thing to do?
Well, with the boys that I was working with, they wanted to make a balaclava.
Okay, I
On
get
with
it now.
eyes.
Oh, I
And I was like,
see.
okay, then let's try it. I mean, I kind of knew that we wouldn't get to the skill level of knitting in the round or shaping or anything.
Yeah.
I wanted to make a balaclava. It ended up a scarf, as it would do.
Hey, that's great. Were they proud with the scarf or snood or whatever it was that they
Absolutely.
made?
But they was like, "I want a balaclava." So it's like, okay, here we go. And it just railroad from there, really. And that's when WoolWellness was born, to support young people. Like I say, the research, it's a lot done on adults and elderly, is dementia prevention, controlling blood pressure, supporting people with addiction and eating disorders. But we are now seeing so many young people with anxiety and depression, eating disorders, and they're at the point where, as the statistics sadly show, they're at the point where they can't cope. And knitting is an active coping skill. Any craft is, but knitting itself, because of those connections across all parts of the brain, it really supports itself into it in a calming, safe space to be able to build those brains, the brain waves, to release those brain waves, and to build those connections between them. And it's hard. It's not an easy feat. It is difficult. It's hard for adults to master. But knowing that you've overcome something that you felt was impossible is huge, huge for your self-esteem and your confidence. And so, the levels of anxiety mean that children are suffering from, if they can see themselves overcoming these barriers, whether it be a barrier to learning or barrier to their emotions, if they can see themselves, they've actively overcome these barriers on something like knitting, then they're able to then take that into their everyday life.
Yeah, and teach others as well, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing.
My eldest client at the moment is 83, and she was suicidal.
Oh gosh.
Suicidal because what life throws at an 83-year-old and what they've had to go through, and people passing away. She was suicidal. So she started to learn how to spin. So I was teaching how to spin. It's unbelievable the change in her attitude to I'm elderly and I can learn something brand new, but also it was supporting her physical health as well as a mental health, because she had to cope with treadling and drafting all at the same time, and that's really difficult. So it was giving her a whole body workout and a brain workout as well. And now she's got her own sheep and is sharing the sheep.
No way! That is so cool.
Now knitting and crocheting using her own wool that she spun. But that came from the coaching we gave her, and their support, and having their support, and somebody to go to speak with, to say, how do I do this? What do I do? How can I fit this in my life? How can I manage with the equipment and things like that? And that's the kind of thing that we offer, not with adults especially, because many adults just want to come back into it because they've used it before as a tool for their own emotional regulation. But if we can do that with adults and it has such a beneficial effect, then it's going to be beneficial for young people, because we've lost the use of handwork in schools.
Yes.
The adults that knit now, the older adults that knit now, they were taught in schools or community groups, or by the mothers or family members. And I don't think they realised they were being taught something that can help and support them. I don't think in society we realise these things that help and support them. Yeah. And when you've got a couple of generations past that haven't got these skills and are not able to cope with everyday pressures, and it gets to a point where we've got massive referrals for young people for mental health issues. Today is it 5 children, the Children's Society saying 5 children in a class of 30 will have got probable or possible mental health diagnosis, and that's huge.
It is.
And so not just for them, but huge for schools to cope with as well.
Yeah. But it's not just, children who are suffering from mental health issues as well. I mean, let's look at the education sector, for example, where we met. 90% of head teachers are feeling stressed. I think 87% of senior leaders are feeling stressed or burnt out as well. That is a massive number of people. And we've got, head teachers, senior leaders, teachers support staff who are trying their best, doing what they can. But let's not forget, we've all been through a pandemic. And that will have affected all of us in different ways. We've all encountered some form of stress or trauma. And I think we're now seeing the results of that. I mean, things were probably not in a great place. Well, they weren't in a great place before the pandemic, but now we have had the pandemic and the lockdowns. It's just made the problem far, far worse. And unless we have strategies that where we think outside the box, such as what you're doing with wool, I think we're going to really struggle as a society. I mean, would you say that what you do could be used as a prevention strategy as well, Lucy?
Well, WoolWellness is an intervention and prevention, non-medical, social prescribing service, really. We are social prescribers for Shropshire and Staffordshire, and rather than a young person getting to breaking point where they feel that they need medication or emergency treatment, putting skills in place to self-soothe and active coping skills that will help with emotional regulation, and will help with communication barriers as well. It's really, really important. We've those years between the ages of 12 and 25, those adolescent years when that brain is going through its next development stage, is key to being able to have a happy and healthy society later on.
Yeah.
And if as communities we don't put active things in place, then you're right, we are going to struggle, because services are massively overloaded. So yes, Woolcraft certainly is a intervention and prevention.
Amazing.
A non-medical approach, and why not try it?
Exactly.
Why not
Exactly.
You've just got a nice craft group otherwise,
Exactly.
It's minimum.
It's a positive thing. So Lucy, where can people find you then if they're really interested and they want to say, right, Lucy, I want you to work with my child, or I want you to work with this group, or we're a group of adults who want to work with you? How can they find you?
So you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at WoolWellness UK, and also on our website at www.woolwellnessuk.org, which has been set up ready and offers support for and services for schools, community groups, individuals, residential homes, anyone that will feel that they need a service like ours.
Fantastic. And that's such brilliant news. And can I just say thank you for all the work that you're doing with young people and adults. I can feel the passion and the energy in your voice and how much you completely believe in what you do. And with all the information that you've given us today, I just can't see why anyone wouldn't want to knit. So the last time I knitted was with my granny, I think, when I was 7 years old, and it was a scarf, and it was a really, really wonky one. But you have inspired me to actually maybe buy a book, or I'll come and visit you and you can teach me to knit, and I am going to knit.
Absolutely.
I'm going to do that.
Yoga for your brain. Yoga for your brain. We'll organise it. Absolutely.
Excellent.
And we're called WoolWellness UK because my vision is to have a wool wellness hub in every school or community group across the country. I mean, that's aiming big, but why not?
Exactly.
We have to take it on ourselves to make these changes if we're going to support a happy, healthy society in the future, don't we?
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Lucy. You've given me so much to think about, and I'm sure our listeners will have a huge amount to think about too. So just a reminder to everyone, 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health problem each year. In some professions, it's even more than that. I'm going to be streaming 4 hours of live content to represent that. And the target that I'm aiming for is £400. And I just want to say a huge thank you once again to Lucy Krissi for joining me today, founder of WoolWellness UK, doing some amazing work with young people and adults. So thank you very much for listening. And please do join me for more ThinkingSpot PonderPod podcasts. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Krissi.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.